Looking back now, I should have seen the warning signs. They were all there, flashing as brightly as the "Welcome to Oak Ridge Gardens" sign with its perfectly manicured flower beds and spotless gold lettering. But when you're caught up in the excitement of buying your first home, it's amazing what red flags your brain will rationalize away. I remember the day I first drove through the neighborhood like it was yesterday. It was early spring, and the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, creating a pink canopy over the winding streets. Every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler and cut with surgical precision. The houses, a pleasant mix of craftsman and colonial styles, sat in perfect harmony with one another, each one maintained to magazine-worthy perfection. After 5 years of saving every penny from my government consulting job and living in a shoebox apartment, I'd finally found my dream home. A modest 3-bedroom craftsman with a bay window and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. The price was at the very top of my budget, and the HOA fees made me wince. But my real estate agent assured me that Oak Ridge Gardens properties consistently appreciated at twice the rate of surrounding neighborhoods. The HOA keeps everything pristine, she explained, a slight hesitation in her voice. Barbara Winters, the president, is particular about maintaining community standards. She laughed nervously after saying this, quickly changing the subject to the home's updated kitchen appliances. I should have asked more questions. The closing process was smooth, almost suspiciously so. The day after I got my keys, a thick binder appeared on my doorstep. Oak Ridge Gardens Homeowners Association, Community Guidelines and Regulations. The table of contents alone was 15 pages long. That evening, as I sat surrounded by moving boxes, I attempted to wade through it. There were sections on everything from acceptable mailbox heights between 41 and 45 inches from ground level, to approved colors for garden hoses, forest green or brown only, must be stored out of sight when not in active use. My first encounter with Barbara Winters came 3 days after moving in. I was in my front yard, arranging some flower pots, when a shadow fell across my work. Looking up, I found myself face to face with a woman in her mid-50s, impeccably dressed in a pastel pantsuit, her silver hair styled in an expensive-looking bob. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which were busy scanning my property like a Terminator assessing for threats. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Gardens," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Barbara Winters, HOA president. I trust you've thoroughly reviewed our community guidelines." Before I could respond, she was already pointing out potential violations. My welcome mat was 1.5 inches too wide, my flower pots were non-standard dimensions, and she had concerns about the shade of blue I was planning to use for my shutters, even though I hadn't planned anything of the sort. "We maintain very high standards here," she explained, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's why our property values are the highest in the county. I'm sure you understand." The first official warning came the next morning. A bright yellow envelope stuck in my door contained a notice of non-compliance regarding my welcome mat, complete with detailed measurements and photographs. The fine would be $50, with an additional $25 per day until the violation was corrected. When I raised the issue at my first HOA meeting that weekend, I got my first real glimpse of how things worked in Oak Ridge Gardens. Barbara ran the meeting like a benevolent dictator, speaking in a calm, measured tone while systematically shutting down any opposition. When I tried to question the welcome mat regulation, she spent 20 minutes explaining the aesthetic and safety implications of non-standard door coverings. I left that meeting with a sinking feeling in my stomach. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning, that my simple dream of homeownership was about to turn into a nightmare of epic proportions. The welcome mat incident was just the opening act in Barbara's theater of absurdity. Over the next month, those yellow violation notices became as regular as my morning coffee. Each one more ridiculous than the last, each one carrying increasingly hefty fines. My bird feeder apparently violated Section 7.34 of the Community Guidelines. no structures or devices that encourage non-native avian species. When I pointed out that the exact same model was hanging in Barbara's yard, she explained that hers was grandfathered in under old regulations. The fact that I'd seen her install it just last week was, according to her, irrelevant to the current discussion. Then came the great Christmas light debacle. We'd had the worst snowstorm in decades, and the power had been out for 2 days. The moment electricity was restored, I received an urgent violation notice about holiday decorations still being up 2 days past the January 2nd deadline. The fact that the entire neighborhood had been literally frozen and dark apparently didn't qualify as a valid excuse. Rules exist for a reason, Ms. Mitchell. Barbara declared at the next HOA meeting, her voice carrying that signature condescending tone. If we make exceptions for weather, what's next? Exceptions for illness, family emergencies, personal convenience? Where does it end? I watched in disbelief as she then proceeded to grant her friend Susan a special dispensation for leaving her lights up until February due to extenuating circumstances. Susan's circumstances. She'd been on a cruise. The citations kept coming. My garage door was an unapproved shade of white. The roses I'd planted were excessive in height by 2 inches. My mailbox post needed to be repainted because it had faded to non-regulation beige. Each violation carried a fine, and each fine came with a deadline that seemed designed to be impossible to meet. I tried appealing through the proper channels. The HOA board meetings became a monthly exercise in futility. Barbara had mastered the art of appearing reasonable while being anything but. She would listen to appeals with a sympathetic expression, head tilted just so, before invariably denying them with a rehearsed speech about community standards and property values. The breaking point came during the garden gnome incident. I didn't even own a garden gnome, but one morning I found a violation notice claiming I had an unauthorized lawn ornament visible from the street. Attached was a photo of what was clearly a shadow cast by my recycling bin. When I tried to point this out, Barbara suggested I might need to have my eyes checked. Perhaps, she said during the appeal hearing, her voice dripping with false concern, if you're having trouble distinguishing between shadows and solid objects, you should consider whether maintaining a property in our community is appropriate for your current capabilities. That's when I noticed something interesting. While Barbara was speaking, I caught sight of her computer screen reflected in the meeting room window. She had a spreadsheet open, one that looked suspiciously like a list of properties with their market values and notes about their owners. Later that week, I overheard her on the phone while collecting my mail. Yes, I think we can get her out within 3 months, she was saying. The fines are adding up nicely, and she's clearly not cut out for this community. Once she falls behind on the payments, we can move forward with the land. That conversation changed everything. This wasn't just about power tripping or rigid rule enforcement. This was systematic. Barbara wasn't just being difficult. She was actively working to force certain homeowners out. But why? And more importantly, what could I do about it? I went home that night and started making calls. If Barbara wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn she'd picked the wrong homeowner to harass. They say misery loves company. In Oak Ridge Gardens, it turned out there was plenty of misery to go around. I just hadn't known where to look for it. My first ally was Tom Rodriguez, the retired Marine Corps veteran 3 doors down. I met him one evening while he was staring at his flagpole, looking like he wanted to use it as a battering ram. Barbara had cited him for improper illumination of a national symbol. Apparently, his flag lighting was 2 degrees off the required angle specified in the HOA guidelines. 23 years I served this country, he fumed, showing me the violation notice. Fought in 3 wars. Now I'm getting lectures about patriotism from someone whose idea of service is coordinating the neighborhood garden tour. When Tom installed the exact lighting system Barbara recommended, at a cost of $600 from her approved vendor, she cited him again for excessive electrical fixtures. The new violation notice arrived less than an hour after installation. But the real game changer came when my sister Sarah moved into the neighborhood. As a federal agent with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit, she dealt with her share of petty tyrants. They all followed the same patterns, she explained over coffee. It's never really about the rules, it's about control and usually money. Sarah's presence seemed to trigger something in Barbara. The sight of an unmarked government vehicle in a residential driveway sent her into a frenzy. Despite Sarah's official documentation showing it was a permitted personal vehicle used for work, Barbara launched a crusade against commercial vehicles in residential areas. The notices came daily. Unauthorized business activity in a residential zone. Improper vehicle storage. Potential security threat to the community. Each violation carried increasingly steep fines, each more absurd than the last. But Sarah, bless her investigator's heart, documented everything. She started building a spreadsheet tracking every violation, every fine, every selective enforcement instance. Other neighbors began coming forward. Mrs. Chen from the corner house shared how she'd been fined for non-approved cultural decorations during Chinese New Year, while Barbara's tacky Halloween decorations stayed up well into December. The paddles showed us citations for cooking odors inconsistent with community standards. We started noticing patterns. Barbara's targets weren't random. She seemed to focus on new homeowners, especially those who'd bought at the peak of the market and might be stretching their budgets. The fines and fees would pile up until they were forced to sell, usually to one of Barbara's friends or associates at below-market rates. The turning point came during a particularly heated HOA meeting. Barbara was droning on about the aesthetic integrity of our community when Sarah noticed something odd about the financial reports. The numbers didn't add up, literally. The maintenance fund showed expenses that didn't match any visible improvements in the neighborhood. After the meeting, we gathered at Tom's house, our unofficial resistance headquarters. Sarah spread out documents across his dining room table, her investigator's instincts in full swing. Look at these contractors, she pointed out. Every major project goes to companies with the same post office box. The landscaping company, the lighting supplier, the maintenance firm. They're all registered to addresses that don't exist. Tom's military training kicked in as we organized our findings. Mrs. Chen, a former accountant, started digging through years of financial records. The Paddles, who ran a successful tech company, helped us create a secure database to store everything. We were no longer just angry homeowners. We were becoming an organized resistance. But as we would soon learn, Barbara had her own tricks up her sleeve, and she wasn't about to let go of her kingdom without a fight. What happened next would make my welcome mat violation look like a parking ticket. They say everybody has a breaking point. In Oak Ridge Gardens, mine came on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning that I'll never forget. The day started with an emergency HOA meeting notice slipped under my door at 6:15 a.m. The topic: immediate security concerns regarding unauthorized government vehicles. Barbara had scheduled it for 7:00 a.m., knowing full well that Sarah had to leave for work by 6:45. But this morning was different. As Sarah backed out of her driveway, 3 cars suddenly blocked her exit. Barbara's Mercedes, Susan's BMW, and HOA treasurer Mark Thompson's Audi. They had coordinated this ambush, waiting until Sarah was already running late for an important meeting at the Treasury Department. Barbara emerged from her car like a general preparing for battle, clutching a red folder labeled Serious Violations. Behind her, Susan was already recording with her phone, no doubt hoping to catch some dramatic footage for the neighborhood Facebook group. This ends today, Barbara announced, her voice carrying across the rain-slicked street. We have documentation of 17 separate vehicle violations. Your car will be towed, and you will be fined $500 per day until you comply with residential vehicle standards. Sarah, usually the most composed person I know, tried to remain professional. Barbara, you've seen my federal documentation. This is a permitted vehicle, and I'm responding to an urgent work matter." That's when Barbara dropped the bomb. "We've contacted your supervisor," she said with a smirk. "Apparently, there are concerns about an agent using their position to intimidate local community leadership." My sister froze. "You did what?" "Oh yes," Barbara continued, waving a piece of paper. "We filed a formal complaint about your abuse of authority. How does an ethics investigation sound? Now move the vehicle to the designated street parking permanently, or we'll have it towed right now." The rain was coming down harder now, and Sarah was getting soaked, but Barbara wasn't finished. "Furthermore, we've initiated proceedings for a property lion due to unpaid fines. Unless you sign this agreement," she pulled out another document, "acknowledging all violations and agreeing to comply with permanent street parking, we'll move forward with collection actions." That's when I noticed something odd. Through the rain-streaked window of Barbara's Mercedes, I could see more folders on her passenger seat. One had the paddle's name on it. Another was labeled Rodriguez, flag violations. This wasn't just about Sarah's car. This was Barbara making her big power play. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Sarah, who had been reaching for the compliance document, suddenly stopped. A look I'd never seen before crossed her face. A mix of professional calculation and pure righteous anger. "Barbara," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I want you to understand something. You haven't just interfered with a federal agent's vehicle. You've now attempted to interfere with a federal investigation by contacting my supervisor with false claims. Do you know what that's called?" Barbara's smirk faltered slightly. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," Sarah replied, pulling out her phone. "I'm educating you on federal statutes. By the way, this conversation is now being recorded as evidence. Would you like to explain why you have files on other residents in your car? The ones I can see from here seem to match the pattern we've been investigating." The color drained from Barbara's face. She took a step back, clutching her folders tighter. "Mark," Sarah called out to the treasurer, who was trying to slide back into his Audi, "I'd stay right there if I were you. We're going to need to discuss those maintenance company payments you've been processing." That's when I realized my sister hadn't been just documenting violations. She'd been building a case, and Barbara had just walked right into a trap. The rain kept falling, but nobody moved. We'd reached the point of no return, and what happened next would change Oak Ridge Gardens forever. The next 48 hours in Oak Ridge Gardens were like watching a perfectly choreographed dance of justice unfold. Sarah hadn't just been documenting violations. She'd been building a federal case that would make Barbara's HOA empire crumble like a house of cards. First came the warrant for Barbara's HOA office, served bright and early the morning after our rainy confrontation. The look on her face when federal agents started boxing up her precious files was worth every single fine she'd ever issued me. But what they found inside those color-coded folders made my welcome mat violation look like a parking ticket. "It's actually impressive, in a sociopathic sort of way," Sarah explained as she spread documents across Tom's dining room table that evening. She had a complete system for targeting and removing homeowners she didn't want in the community. The evidence was damning. Barbara had created detailed profiles on dozens of residents, complete with financial information that she shouldn't have had access to. Each file contained what she called pressure points, ways to force people out through coordinated harassment and selective enforcement. But the real smoking gun came from Mark Thompson, the treasurer, who folded like a cheap lawn chair the moment federal agents mentioned the words wire fraud. He'd been cooking the books for years, helping Barbara funnel HOA funds through a maze of fake maintenance companies. "See these landscaping charges?" Sarah pointed to a spreadsheet. $50,000 for emergency tree removal last spring. The company, Green Valley Services LLC, is registered to Barbara's brother-in-law. The trees never existed. The scheme went deeper than anyone imagined. Barbara had been running what amounted to a real estate racket. She'd target homeowners who had bought at the market peak, hammer them with fines and violations until they couldn't afford to stay, then arrange for her friends to buy the properties at distressed prices. The friends would then flip the houses for a profit, with Barbara getting a generous cut under the table. Tom's military precision came in handy as we organized the evidence. His garage became our war room, walls covered with flowcharts showing the connections between Barbara's fake companies and the money trail. Mrs. Chen's accounting expertise helped us track every missing dollar, while the Paddle's tech skills let us create a secure database of evidence. The neighborhood started talking. Once people realized they weren't alone, the stories came pouring out. Barbara had forced out 3 mixed-race families in the past year alone, using her aesthetic violations as a cover for discrimination. She targeted single mothers, claiming their children's toys violated community standards. Even her fellow board members weren't safe. Anyone who questioned her authority found themselves on the receiving end of her special audits. But Barbara wasn't going down without a fight. When she realized what was happening, she tried to destroy evidence. Security cameras caught her and Susan attempting to access the HOA office at 2 a.m. with a paper shredder. Unfortunately for them, we already copied everything. Then came the intimidation attempts. Barbara's lawyer, her other brother-in-law, naturally, started sending threatening letters to everyone who'd spoken against her. She tried to call an emergency board meeting to revise the financial records. When that failed, she attempted to claim that she was the real victim of a conspiracy by disgruntled residents. The final straw was when she tried to claim diplomatic immunity. Yes, really. Apparently, her third cousin's husband had once worked as a janitor at an embassy, and she thought this somehow extended to her. The federal agents found this particularly amusing. But her desperate flailing only dug her hole deeper. Each attempt to cover her tracks provided more evidence for our case. As Sarah put it, sometimes the best thing a criminal can do is just shut up and lawyer up. We weren't just fighting back anymore, we were winning. And Barbara's carefully constructed kingdom was about to come crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. They say rats are the first to abandon a sinking ship. In Barbara's case, it was her most trusted ally, HOA Treasurer Mark Thompson, who started the exodus. After 20 years of loyal service to her regime, it took exactly 6 hours of federal questioning before he turned state's evidence. "You don't understand," Mark stammered during his official statement, sweat staining his designer shirt. "Barbara has everything on everyone. She kept files, blackmail files. The real ones aren't in the HOA office. They're in her home safe, behind the fake Monet in her study." That revelation led to a second search warrant, this time for Barbara's personal residence. When federal agents showed up at her door at 6 a.m., she answered in her signature pastel pantsuit, perfectly coiffed as if she'd been expecting them. The smirk on her face lasted exactly as long as it took the lead agent to say the words, "conspiracy to commit mail fraud." What they found in her home office made the HOA records look like child's play. Barbara hadn't just been running a corrupt homeowners association. She'd been operating a sophisticated real estate fraud scheme across 3 counties. The safe behind her fake Monet, which turned out to be fake itself, contained enough evidence to keep federal prosecutors busy for months. "It's like a masterclass in small-scale organized crime," Sarah explained as we reviewed the findings. She had detailed profiles on every board member, complete with leverage points. Look at this. She knew Susan was underwater on her mortgage and used that to keep her in line. The Thompsons' kids' college fund. She managed it through one of her shell companies. The domino effect was spectacular. Susan cracked next, arriving at Sarah's office with a banker's box full of documents and a tearful confession about her role in the scheme. She'd been Barbara's enforcer, deliberately targeting certain homeowners with violations while ignoring others based on Barbara's instructions. "She made me do it," Susan sobbed, mascara running down her face. She said if I didn't help her, She'd make sure my underwater mortgage became public knowledge. Do you know what that would do to my interior design business? The board members started turning on each other like characters in an Agatha Christie novel. Vice President Jim Carson tried to claim he was just following orders, apparently forgetting that defense hadn't worked well at Nuremberg. Secretary Linda Martinez suddenly remembered years of meeting minutes that had been, accidentally, left out of official records. Barbara's carefully constructed hierarchy collapsed like a pyramid scheme in a mathematical proof. Her loyal supporters, facing their own legal troubles, couldn't distance themselves fast enough. The monthly HOA meeting, usually Barbara's stage for petty tyranny, turned into a circular firing squad of accusations and revelations. The coup de grace came from Barbara's own sister-in-law, Janet, who'd been running the fake landscaping company. Janet showed up at the federal building with a USB drive containing 5 years of detailed records. Every fraudulent invoice, every kickback, every property flip coordinated through their scheme. She screwed me over on the Peterson property flip, Janet explained bitterly. Promised me 30% and only gave me 10%. Said I should be grateful for what I got. Grateful. I've been maintaining fake business records for 5 years. Do you know how much work that is? Barbara's response to the betrayals was pure theater. She called an emergency HOA meeting, which nobody attended except federal agents recording everything she said. She tried to claim that all the financial irregularities were computer errors caused by software updates. When that didn't work, she attempted to blame everything on mysterious John, a handyman who had supposedly handled all the maintenance contracts. John, unsurprisingly, didn't exist. But her most desperate move was yet to come. As her empire crumbled around her, Barbara decided to play her final card, one that would lead to the most spectacular HOA meeting in Oak Ridge Gardens history. The final HOA meeting of Barbara's reign began exactly as she'd planned, just not in the way she'd hoped. The community center was packed, every seat filled, with people standing along the walls. Barbara had demanded this emergency session to address the scandalous accusations and restore order to our beloved community. What she didn't know was that half the audience consisted of federal agents and state prosecutors. Barbara swept in wearing her most expensive suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, clutching a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The smirk on her face suggested she thought she still had an ace up her sleeve. Before we begin, she announced, taking her usual position at the podium, I have evidence that will expose this entire investigation as a vindictive conspiracy orchestrated by disgruntled residents who simply couldn't maintain our community standards. She began projecting a PowerPoint presentation onto the wall. As you can see, our property values had increased 150% under my leadership. Every single decision I've made has been for the benefit of this community. That's when Sarah stood up. Actually, Barbara, let's talk about those property values. Specifically, let's discuss the 17 houses you forced into distressed sales over the past 3 years. Barbara's finger froze over her laptop. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Sarah pulled out her own presentation remote. The projector image changed to a detailed flowchart. Because according to your own records, the ones you kept in that safe behind the fake Monet, you've been running quite the sophisticated operation. The room erupted in murmurs as Sarah laid out the evidence. Properties systematically devalued through targeted harassment, then purchased by shell companies owned by Barbara's family members. Each house flipped for massive profits, with kickbacks carefully laundered through fake maintenance contracts. But that's not even the worst part, Sarah continued. Would you like to explain why you have detailed financial information about residents that could only have been obtained through illegal means? Or shall we discuss the discriminatory pattern in your enforcement actions? Barbara's face went from powder white to crimson. This is slander. I have documentation proving everything was approved by the board. You mean these documents? A man in a suit stood up from the back row, holding up a file. I'm Special Agent Roberts with the FBI's white-collar crime division. We've already confirmed these signatures were forged. Would you like to explain why you have a rubber stamp collection of board members' signatures in your home office? That's when Barbara made her final, desperate play. She pulled out a stack of papers from her portfolio. None of that matters. I've already filed for dissolution of the current HOA and established a new one under a different charter. All assets have been legally transferred to the new entity, which I solely control. You have no jurisdiction here. The room went silent. Then, surprisingly, Sarah smiled. We were wondering when you'd try that, she said quietly. Did you know that when you file for a new HOA corporation, you have to disclose any ongoing investigations into similar entities you've managed? Did you also know that falsifying those disclosure forms is a federal offense? Barbara's face went slack. The papers slipped from her fingers, scattering across the floor. Furthermore, Sarah continued, every property transfer you've attempted in the last week has been flagged and frozen. The FBI has been watching your accounts since the moment we executed the first search warrant. Did you really think we wouldn't anticipate this? That's when Barbara did something none of us expected. She laughed. Not a nervous chuckle or a forced laugh, but a genuine, almost maniacal laugh. You fools, she sneered, reaching into her portfolio one last time. If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. She pulled out a final folder, red-labeled and thick with documents. Let's see how property values do when I release every bit of dirty laundry I've collected over the past 15 years. Every affair, every financial secret, every skeleton in every closet. The room held its breath. Barbara had just played her last card and signed her own arrest warrant. Barbara's threat to expose everyone's secrets hung in the air for exactly 12 seconds before Tom Rodriguez slowly stood up from his seat. The retired Marine's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Go ahead, he said calmly. My secret is that I fudged the angle of my flagpole by 2 degrees. I think we can all live with our neighbors knowing our minor infractions if it means ending your reign of terror. One by one, other residents stood up. I painted my door colonial blue instead of Newport blue, Mrs. Chen announced proudly. My kid's lemonade stand didn't have a permit, called out Jack Patterson. I have non-regulation garden gnomes, declared Linda Martinez, former HOA secretary. A whole army of them in my basement, just waiting to be deployed. Barbara's face contorted as her last weapon crumbled. What she'd seen as devastating secrets were, for the most part, just the normal, human moments of community life. The real scandals, the financial fraud, the discrimination, the illegal property schemes were all hers. Special Agent Roberts stepped forward, gesturing to 2 agents by the door. Barbara Winters, you are under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and attempted blackmail. I'd read you your rights, but something tells me you've already memorized them from all those police procedurals you made the community watch during mandatory movie nights. As they led Barbara away in handcuffs, she maintained her dignity right until she reached the door. Then she turned, her mask finally cracking completely. I made this community what it is, she shrieked. Without me, it'll collapse into chaos. Your property values will plummet. You'll all be living next to people with pink flamingos and vinyl siding. Actually, Sarah stepped forward, holding up a document. Property values in neighboring communities without HOAs have outperformed ours for the past 5 years. Turns out, constant harassment and corruption aren't great for real estate prices. The aftermath was both swift and satisfying. The FBI's investigation revealed that Barbara's scheme extended to 2 other HOAs in neighboring counties. She'd been running a complex network of fraud that made our local problems look like a warm-up act. The court appointed a receiver to manage the HOA's dissolution. All improperly collected fines were ordered to be repaid with interest. The maintenance contracts were reviewed, and the legitimate ones. All three of them were maintained. Barbara's final tally was impressive. 15 years of systematic fraud. Over $2 million in misappropriated funds. 42 illegally forced property sales. 347 fraudulent violation notices. 1 fake money, which the FBI kept as evidence, much to her dismay. She took a plea deal for 12 years in federal prison, though her lawyer argued for leniency based on her contributions to community aesthetics. The judge was not impressed. As for Oak Ridge Gardens, we held our first real community meeting 2 weeks later. No violation notices, no fines, no threats, just neighbors actually talking to each other. Tom's flag flew at whatever angle he chose. Mrs. Chen's Chinese New Year decorations went up without incident. The Paddles hosted a Diwali celebration that the whole neighborhood attended. My welcome mat? It's still non-regulation size, and it's staying that way. Sarah received a commendation from her department for uncovering the broader fraud network. She still parks her government vehicle in her driveway, and nowadays, people wave when they see it. It's become a symbol of protection rather than controversy. The most ironic twist: our property values actually increased after Barbara's removal. Turns out, people prefer communities where they don't live in fear of their mailbox height being off by a quarter inch. As for Barbara's precious files of secrets, they're now part of an FBI training program on how HOO fraud schemes operate. Her meticulous documentation of her own crimes became the perfect case study in what not to do. Just last week, I saw a pink flamingo peeking out from behind Tom's perfectly regulation-free bushes. I think Barbara would have had a stroke if she'd seen it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the bad guys, it's creating something better in the aftermath of their destruction.